And last but not least, Travis, you're on the phone with us today. Can you give us a little bit of information about your expertise and where we can learn more about you?
Absolutely. I am the co-founder of Aspire Communications. We handle representation for authors, artists, also individual firms. We have a couple of technology clients and things along those lines. We specialize in branding and in public relations and also agency representation. We have currently right now about a dozen clients that we represent all over the U.S. I'm in Las Vegas this week, and I apologize. I wanted to be in the studio with you guys there, but I'm actually here with a client this week. We've been doing some presentations, and we've got some media interviews that we're going to be doing tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday here in the Las Vegas market. But my background started out in radio, then into television, and then in the mid-'90s, my longtime good friend, Charlie McCracken, and a business partner for about the past 17 years, we became senior partners in a public relations firm. We sold that firm in 2003 and laid the groundwork for what has become Aspire Communications.
How do you feel the importance of a public representative plays into this? Like, you know, I mean, it is kind of your job. I know in Shelley's case, it's her job to try and make everyone look good at David Sachs Productions. And I know, Travis, you do your best to do the same thing with your authors. And Shelley, you probably do the same thing with the people you're handling. So how important is that, and how do you know how to juggle that?
You know, I think in a very nuts and bolts kind of fashion, because I do a little bit of what Shelley does. I do not so much what Dana does from a helping authors with writing. We do provide some editing services and graphic design work for authors and things like that, but I think from a very nuts and bolts fundamental aspect that a representative, whether it's a publicist, whether it's a PR firm, whether it's an agent, it lends a great deal of credibility to that client when you start trying to pitch them to the media. I've had a lot of authors that have come to me after they've already published their book and they've tried to go their own route, because I do a lot of self-published authors, emerging authors, and they can't get a single interview. But when they hire us and we start going on their behalf, doors that were never open for them before all of a sudden do become open. And what I tell authors is, because we work very hard on the brand, the image of that client, and helping authors understand they are the brand, the book is a product. So I think there's three things that authors have to look at: viability, marketability, and sustainability. And those are the three things that I tell all the authors when they come to us. And it comes right back to what I believe Shelley was saying, which is it does have to do with selling the product, whatever that product is.
How do you know how to go about getting the right public representative, I guess is what I'm trying to say?
There are so many individuals that do specialize in the type of things that Shelley and I do, which is working from and she used the term pitching, and you know that's a term that a lot of people may not be familiar with, but you take a client who has a concept, whether it's a book, whether it's a CD, whether they're a musician, and what you do is you start taking them to media after media after media, trying to get them interviews, because the first step in this whole process is actually recognition. You have to get recognized. You have to have your name out there as much as possible, especially if you are, the term that we use is an emerging talent, an emerging author, an emerging artist, whatever that may be in your field. I don't like saying no name. I don't like saying unrecognized. You're emerging. You're coming into your own. And the first step in establishing your brand identity and who you are, whether you're an expert, which we've done with a couple of clients, or whether you're an author and you want people to buy your book, they have to know who you are. My business partner and I used to talk a lot about what we call Field of Dreams syndrome. And if you remember the movie from the 80s, Field of Dreams, you know, if you build it, he will come. And a lot of authors, just like a lot of business owners, think that they have a concept, they write a book, that it's automatically going to start selling, and that's just not the way it works. You know, I agree with what Dana is saying, and I agree with what Shelley said. I mean, I think, you know, hearing what Dana is doing is an amazing service, because so many people want to write, but they have, and I agree with her. I say that there are three types of authors. You have authors that are creative, and they are like every other artist, every other talent. They want to bring something to life. There are also writers that are cathartic. They write to release something, whether it is an emotion, whether it's a story from their past. They need to get that out. And then there are writers that want to be commercial. I can't tell you writers that I deal with that want to be the next J.K. Rowling, or the next Stephanie Meyers, or the next Stephen King, or they want to be the next Nicholas Sparks. They want to be, all they want to do is sell. So I think there are three types of authors that are out there, and I've worked with all three types. And I think that what is very important for them is what Dana is doing, which is actually educating them and showing them that it's not just having a good concept and a good idea, but there is a lot of very intricate details that go on behind the scenes that if you don't have those in place, it can actually, or having them out of sequence can actually do more damage than not having them at all, if you're not taking the right steps and planning what you do.
I agree. What would you say, I'm going to ask Travis this, is probably the most important thing in having a public representative when it comes to being an author?
I'm going to ask you to ask me that again because I'm getting a little interference on the phone. I heard the first part and the last part, but not probably what was the most important part of the question.
and that is, yeah, what are the benefits of having you as a representative?
Of me or someone?
Well, yeah, public representative in general.
There's a lot of bonuses and pluses. Number one, and I think it was Shelley that mentioned it. There's basically a Rolodex. I'm using a very old term now of media contacts. I mean, I've been in broadcasting since the early '90s. I know producers, I know hosts, I know journalists, I know magazine editors. I have contacts that an author is not going to have. That's one of the first. The second is that a public relations consultant, a public relations specialist is going to help you not only pitch your story, but they're going to help you fine-tune your ability to do an interview, hopefully. Now, not everyone does, and that's something that my firm does. We do public relations. We also do media coaching. We also do the agency representation. And I will say that I don't want to confuse any of the listeners. I'm not a literary agent. Now, I have done that for some authors. I have helped pitch them to publishing houses. But we are right now more in the vein of what you would call a talent agency, and that's what we're doing with a couple of our clients, which is actually taking them from being just an author to actually establishing a whole brand and a whole entity around them and what they want as far as extra merchandising and additional revenue streams that can come in down the road for them. So there's a lot of, basically it comes down to knowledge, it comes down to time, and it comes down to resources. An author that has written a book and they are also trying to do their own publicity and they're trying to pitch themselves, and also most of the authors that are self-published and emerging also hold a full-time job at something else. They're writing in their spare time. They don't have the time to pitch themselves to the media. They don't have the time to try to orchestrate an interview and come up with interview questions and write a press release and send that out. And all of those things are done by someone in the field that I work in, the field that Shelley works in, where that we actually take those individuals and we help them kind of over those obstacles and through those doors.
Shelley?
And with what you just said, what would you say holds the most extreme value? For me, when you were talking about the media contacts, that to me is the most important because, again, it goes back to the door opening.
Exactly.
You had mentioned giving people the ability to demonstrate good body language and being able to speak appropriately during interviews. But if you had to assign a percentage to what you think is the most important, what would that be in what you mentioned?
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's going to be the media contacts because that's just that's a perk of being in the business that we're in.
Yes.
That's something that anyone on the street is not going to be able to pick up their iPhone or their BlackBerry and be able to scroll down and talk to a producer at CNN, talk to a producer with Fox 5 here in Las Vegas or any of those things. But that is the added bonus that we bring to the table, whether it's for an author, whether it's for a business, whether it's for and my firm has worked for individuals that want to change their image, and we've worked for companies that needed help in getting positive press, and I think that is by far the most important. But I do think, honestly, secondly, it's time. These individuals don't have time to do their own publicity. They might think that they do, but then what happens is about 6 weeks in, they're inundated, and they realize they haven't done a single interview, they haven't talked to a single media representative, and they have less publicity now than they did when they published their book.
So when it comes to the internet and trying to find a PR person, how is that perceived? I mean, how would you go about that? It's
extremely easy. I echo what Shelley says. It's not just in Vegas that we, and I use that term all inclusively. We're a dime a dozen. Especially right now, you have a lot of individuals that are freelancing as publicists and PR individuals. They've been laid off, they've been downsized, and I'm not saying anything negative about any of those individuals. It's very easy to find them. I've talked to several clients that come my way. I'm 10th, 11th, 12th on the list that they've talked to, that they're getting contracts from, proposals from, to review to see what it is that we bring to the table and what we charge and things like that. It's very easy to go to any number of, not even just Google, but you go to LinkedIn, you go to any of the social media sites for professionals, and you're going to find an abundance of PR professionals that want to take you on as a client.
And Travis, do you see that it's all contingent upon the charge or the rate?
I find that is one of the main factors. Not always, but it is an issue for a lot of, especially emerging authors and self-published authors. They don't have exactly the budget that's in place to pay some of the fees that publicist firms charge. There are those that realize how important it is, and they are willing to put whatever it takes into their image and into their brand. But I do find, as is the case in most circumstances, that money does become a huge issue for these individuals.
So, Travis, what's been your experience with agents?
I think I agree, again, with what Shelley and Dana are saying. I think it is for an agent, when I represent someone as their agent, it is about what we're going to be able to do long term. I mentioned earlier that I talk about the 3 abilities that a writer needs. Viability, which basically means, is there a market for what you're writing? And in that market, what's your competition like? And then there is marketability, which is, what are you going to do to help me help you promote the book? I've had authors tell me that I honestly, about 3 years ago, I had an author that had written a wonderful story, true story, and she didn't want to do any interviews, though. She wanted the book to sell, but she didn't want to do any interviews. She didn't want to do any television. She didn't want to do any radio. She would do print occasionally, but that was it. That's a huge problem, whether you're the agent or you're the PR person. If you don't want to do something to market your own book, we have a huge issue. And the third one that I talk about is sustainability. I am not going to represent someone who's only going to write one book, sit back, and hope that book sells. They have to either be already moving on to book 2 or 3, or they have to be able to develop a total line of merchandising, either based on that book or what they do, whether it's speaking engagements, whether it is seminars, whether it's DVDs, whether it's apparel or something. We have to help them create the merchandise that, as I mentioned earlier, creates that revenue stream that, yes, as the agent, I am going to be getting a percentage of.
When it comes to the social media, how does PR play into that? I mean, do you just take the social media that individual has, or do you cast that in your own light with your companies or whatever?
Agree. Social media is its own beast. That is, I mean, that it honestly is a subculture of public relations. And while we do a little bit of social media, kind of like Shelley's saying, it's something we're just now starting to do. Gabriella was doing it, 3 years ago, which is why when she came to us, she had a social media following between her, because she speaks fluently several languages. So she has an English Facebook page, a Spanish Facebook page, a French Facebook page, a Dutch Facebook page. Same thing with Twitter. So between all of those different languages and those different social media sites, she has about 300,000 followers.
Wow.
Which for a self-published emerging author is not bad.
Not at all.
And we've been able to utilize that social media to then catapult other things, book sales, recognition, people talking about her when she's in cities, and opening dialogue with a lot of these individuals about their own experiences and things that she can address either in interviews or in presentations. But no, social media is not easy. It is not, and public relations is not easy, and nor is being an agent representative. Those are very tedious processes. It's fun. I love my job. Don't get me wrong. I've done a lot of things. I've stepped out of this role from time to time. I've done other things, still in the marketing and the public relations vein, but I always come back to doing this because this is what I love.